Okay.
How's your holiday been?
Oh, lovely.
Yeah, you had a good time?
I have.
Yeah.
Just relaxing, not thinking of shopping, washing, chilling.
Seen the grandkids?
Yeah.
Yeah. have grown up since you've last seen them?
Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so the purpose of this is just to basically try and capture for future generations of the Trand family. So the kids, grandkids and so on, so they know who Nana was.
Yeah.
So do you want to tell us about your early life?
I used to live with my nana and granddad in Kensal Rise, which is NW10 in London. It was a terrace house. The whole street was one terrace. It wasn't their property. And I think at one time they'd occupied the whole of the house when they had their young family. But when I remember it, my grandparents only lived on the ground floor. And I had I think like the little third bedroom box room upstairs. And my mother, and presumably my father did as well, but I actually don't remember my father being around that much. I think he was still in the army.
Yeah.
We had an outside toilet and a very small garden.
Yeah.
And I was there till 4.5, 5. And I actually had started school there, but only for one term, because then I became ill. I'd had whooping cough, which then was serious illness. And then after I got over that, we then moved to our own flat. Dad was definitely there then, in West Kensington. And that was a flat on the 3rd floor. The basement, yeah. So we had about 40 steps to get up. And it was 1 bedroom. And obviously it had an inside toilet.
Yeah.
And it was at West Ken in Sinclair Road that I met Maureen, who lived about 4 doors away. And I think I met her just by playing in the street.
Yeah.
And everybody played in the street, all the kids played in the street because we didn't have a garden. Actually, Maureen had a little bit of a garden. And she lived in a basement. That's why she had a bit of a garden. But it wasn't really accessible. And then, I knew quite a few of the kids down the road. And it was a very long road. And we were 96, house number 96. And we were about the middle. And I had restrictions on where I could go. I wasn't to go further up the road than the pillar box and further down the road than the bomb site, because sometimes we did go and play on the bomb site.
What was the bomb site?
It was houses that had just been bombed. I mean, there was lots of bomb sites then. And thinking about it, our place probably had more damage. We had big cracks and things, which everybody just accepted because it was literally post-war, 1950.
Yeah.
51.
All right.
Like that. And there were lots of bomb sites, and the kids used to go and play on them. So there was quite a bit of building going on, and I can remember going and playing when they were building what we called a skyscraper then, which was about 6 stories, and we used to be able to climb up the stairs and things, and nobody took a blind bit of notice. There was no health and safety to stop you going on things. Yeah.
Oh, cool.
And of course we used to, a bit like Chloe does now, she's got more freedom than kids at home have now. We used to be able to go quite a way once we got to the 7, 8, 9 time thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's good. And so you said your dad was in the army.
Yeah.
And what did your mum do? Did your mum have a job then, or was she just...
When I remember her, she was at home. She didn't go out to work till I was about 9 or 10. and she'd been a secretary, and she went back to work as a secretary.
Yeah. And do you want to tell us about your mum? What was her name?
Oh, Audrey.
Yep.
And she had the red hair like Chloe.
Yep.
But I don't think anyone else of her family had it. So, yeah, I don't know what else to say about her, really.
Yeah, what about your grandmother then?
My nan.
So her side, she didn't have red hair? Don't remember.
I only ever knew it was sort of grey, dark grey hair.
Yeah.
And it was a fashion, you had waves put in your hair, so her hair was waved with these horrible Kirby grip things. So, yeah, and she was very small and slight, and if you've seen in the photograph, she always tended to be a little bit on one side, but she had quite a good sense of humour.
Okay.
Yeah. My granddad taught me how to play cribbage, because obviously he was retired by then. And unfortunately, I can't remember how to play it now. But
I'm sure it'll come back to you.
But no, it hasn't. But I have got a cribbage board.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's one he made for me or not.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. So that's learning to count your numbers, your mental arithmetic.
Yeah. Cool. And what? So I know your mum died quite young.
Yeah.
What did she die of?
She had rheumatoid arthritis, and evidently as a child she'd had rheumatic fever, which can sort of lead on to these things. It's now been seen as an autoimmune disease.
Yeah.
So treatment is much different, but at the time there wasn't pain killing really. And her older sister had it, Eileen, had the same thing. I think it's quite common because of all the other childhood illnesses people had then.
Yeah.
Because it was pre-NHS.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And it's not hereditary.
Sorry?
Is that hereditary or just the conditions you're born in?
There is some, but not a great deal. It's more the environment as well.
Yep.
But sort of talking about NHS, I can remember having coughs and cold as a child and being taken to the chemist, and they would go and make up a cough mixture which you paid for. It wasn't like you got a prescription and things. So, I mean, the other thing as a child, evidently, and I don't really remember, not being a good feeder, and I had very bad tonsils, so I had my tonsils out, but nobody, it was not the time when you trained the kids to think about what was going to happen to them, so I was just taken one day to hospital and left. And that was it. I had no idea what it was all about. And I can remember being really indignant because I'd been put into a cot, and I was the only cot there were, and the others were 3 boys in the room, and I was the only girl.
Mm. How old were you then?
About 4, I think,
Wow.
3 or 4. And evidently, once I got over that, I ate.
Okay.
And coming back from that, well, I was still in the pushchair. Maybe it was because it was such a long walk
Yeah.
to the hospital. Being given a rubber duck, and it really was a rubber duck to play with in the bath.
Yep. Do you have any special memories of family gatherings or traditions or any happy memories as a childhood?
I don't remember anything particular for Christmas and Easter. Well, that's a bit unfair. Obviously, when we lived in Sinclair Road, we certainly celebrated Christmas, but it was much more confined to sort of a couple of weeks around Christmas. And I can remember getting the Christmas tree up sort of maybe the day before Christmas Eve.
Okay.
Going and buying it was chickens then, because never ever heard of turkey for Christmas, and you didn't have chicken during the rest of the year.
Yeah.
And I suppose in a way we used to eat much more of the whole animal, eat the offal, and had liver and kidneys and
Yeah.
all the rest. And then coming home, Mum having to pluck the chicken. You know, it's
So
all
you buy the
those-
whole chicken.
Huh?
You buy the whole chicken.
You buy the whole chicken and it's not prepared for you. It's not in a plastic bag and thing. But I don't remember big Christmases. Don't remember sort of having my grandparents, but they certainly never ever came to our flat in West Kent. We used to go and visit them,
Yeah.
but it was 2 bus journeys.
Yeah.
And then Auntie Margie, obviously, first of all lived up in Cumberland, and then when she was down in Kent, saw her more often, but they didn't come for Christmas or Easter, and I don't remember Easter being a big festival.
Yeah.
In a way, I don't really, I suppose you see, sweets were still on ration.
Yeah.
There was still a sugar shortage. So, yeah, sugar and all those things didn't come off ration until about 1952, 1953. And it was sort of done because of the Queen's thing. So I can really remember Easter having a sugar mouse.
Yeah.
Don't remember chocolate eggs at that age.
Yeah. There you go. So that you were in your second house then, and then you went your high school years. Where did you go to school? Where were you living then?
I'm still in West Kent. So Mum started going out to work just before I left middle school, so they could save up for their own property, because by then people were beginning to buy their own place. So I had, yes, when children never used to stay for school lunches. You all used to go home because no mother went
To work.
to work. There was just 1 or 2 children in our class who stayed because their mothers had been widowed and school kept them, sort of thing, because the mums obviously had to go out to work. So high school was in Hammersmith, so I had to walk there. It used to take me about 45, 50 minutes to walk to school.
Yeah.
That was Godolphin and Latimer. And we moved to our own house in Northolt in 62, I think.
Yeah.
And then I had my own bedroom for the first time.
How old were you then?
About 13, 14.
So those first 13 years of your life you were sharing with your...
Well, no, the last few years in Sinclair Road, they obviously realised you shouldn't be sharing them. Mum and Dad moved out of the bedroom and they bought a settee couch thing they pulled out. So they slept in the living room.
Yeah.
Yes, from probably when I was about 12, 11, 12, for 2 or 3 years.
Yeah.
Yes, I had my own bedroom in Northolt.
Yeah.
So it was the first time I had my own bed, and the wardrobe that you used to have upstairs was
Your first wardrobe.
was bought for me, and the bookcase
Yep.
was bought for me. So that's why I sort of hang on to them.
Yeah.
They were my very first bits of my own.
Yeah. And then, so from Norfolk, you were going to high school where?
Still the same, I didn't change.
Which was where? Was
In
Harrow?
Hammersmith.
Hammersmith. Wow. So how did you get to Hammersmith from Norfolk?
Central line to White City, and a bus all round Shepherd's Bush to Hammersmith.
Yep. I thought your high school was in Harrow.
No,
Okay, there you go. Do you want to tell us about high school? Any memories?
Well, high school was very different in the sense it was girls only. And also in middle school, we had about 48 children in the class. I mean, obviously there was a baby boom. But when I went to high school, the classes were much smaller. We had 25, 30 kids in the class. And yes, you took an exam to get into. The schools were then divided into something called secondary modern and grammar school, and I got into the grammar school. But to get into Godolphin, you had to take another exam and an oral one as well.
Yeah.
I remember having to stand up and read a poem and answer a question on this poem. So yes, you then had more separate lessons in doing French for the first time and German and geography. And I suppose in middle school you just did
English, math, science.
Yeah, but I don't ever remember it being called English math. Well, remember doing sums, mental arithmetic, but not really particularly English.
Yep. Fair enough. And when did you finish high school? What age did you finish?
18.
Yep.
Finished at 18.
And what happened then?
So
What did you
exams
do?
at 16 and then exams at 18. What did I do? I left, well, because I wasn't planning on going to university, I had never really heard of university. After O-levels, which was 16, I did more O-levels and the secretarial course. And the secretarial teacher obviously realised I had a inclination for the sciences and got me an interview at the medical school at Hammersmith Hospital. So that was my first job. So I left school. Well, you had to stay until the end of term. You couldn't leave at the end of exams. So I finished in the July. 2 weeks later, I started work.
Yep.
And then I was saying to you, it was a longer working day, and it was also half day Saturday every other week.
Yeah. So when you say a longer working day, what does that mean?
Well, it's 9 to 5:30, whereas it tends to be 9 to 5 or 9:30 to 5:30, and
Yep. Yep. And so from there, when did you meet Dad?
Well, he worked at the same place.
So it was when you met Dad. So so you moved there at 18.
Yes.
Yep. And then.
And he was already working there.
Okay.
And I suppose he came into my thing because he used to come in, well, the area where we were, for tea and coffee.
Yep.
And then we used to go to lunch together and then go and catch the train together and...
Yep. Yeah, fair enough. And then, so tell me, I think you've said this before, like, but this was before mobile phones and phones, like organising dates. Tell me about how you coordinated and organised.
I suppose that was helpful that you worked together because you could make arrangements like that and you really had to keep them. Yes, we didn't have we had a phone at home when we moved to Northolt, simply because at the time my Nana was ill and she was living with Auntie Margie at the time.
In Kent?
In Ashford.
Yeah.
She wasn't in High Horton then. But they were difficult to do long distance calls I mean, by then you could dial them, but they didn't always succeed. And then when Mike and I got married, we never had a phone. There weren't enough phone lines. And then when we did get a phone, we had to share it with somebody. We never knew who they were. Just if you lifted a phone and there was someone talking, you had to put it down.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's crazy.
And then obviously the telephone exchanges all expanded.
Yeah.
And you got individual phone lines.
Yeah. So you said you married Dad. What age did you marry Dad? And
21.
yeah.
And he was 24.
Where did you get married?
St Mary's in Northolt. So that was 8th of July 1967.
Yep.
I have to think about it because sometimes I think it's the 7th of July 1968. So Maureen was my big bridesmaid then, and Dawn and Clemmy were my little bridesmaids, and because they're about the same age, they were about 10. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. And then what happened? How did life? So you're still working at Hammersmith then?
Yeah, we were both still working at Hammersmith. So yes, that journey to work was easier than journey to school, because although it was a longer walk, just took the train to East Acton and walked all the way.
Yeah. And so then you had my sister, Claire.
Yep.
You want to tell me about the early years with Claire and what you did for work, like what happened then? So I presume you stopped working.
No. You actually had, I think you were meant to stop working about 8 months then. So I did have that time at home. But I was one of the first from medical school to go on maternity leave, which was only 6 weeks. And then you had to work a year afterwards. So I chose to work it as part-time for 2 years. And then I left work for 2-3 years.
So when she was like 2 or 3?
When she was 2. And then I went back after my mother died, which was when Claire was at school.
Yep.
4 to 5, so I went back to work then. And then that's when I went back part-time at the Jerry Lewis Labs, which was a bit unfortunate because I'd only been there 3 months and I was pregnant with you.
All right, well, tell me about me. How was I as a baby?
Well, the pregnancy was easier in a way.
In what way?
Because I wasn't sick. With Claire, I was so sick. I hated it. And I suppose you know what to expect the second time round. And it was then more the difficulty of having the baby and one at school and going up and down. And
do you have any help?
Well, Auntie Diane used to look after you while I was at work, sort of in the morning.
So Auntie Diane was our neighbour?
Auntie Diane lived 2 doors away.
Yep.
And I'd met her at antenatal classes.
So they had kids similar age?
Peter's just 2 weeks different.
To Claire?
To Claire. So yeah, she used to look after you. What else was it? What else was the question?
It was did you have help?
No. No help.
No help, yeah. And we were all living in Northolt then?
We were all living in Northolt then.
Yeah. Do you want to talk about where Dad's from and his side of the family and how he came to the UK?
Well, as you know, Dad was born in Alexandria. and Alexandria was a very European settlement there as well. I mean, a lot of the places around the Med were quite European for trading. And so his mum, Nina, your grandma, was born, I think she was born in Cairo, and then they moved to Alexandria.
And her parents, what do you know where they were from? It's all right if you don't.
Well, I have a feeling the granddad's granddad was something to do with cotton, but I'm not certain. And I was under the impression the grandmother was either Italian or Maltese, but
Yeah.
not certain about that either, really. And Egypt was a kingdom, it had a king. And the king got overthrown, and then the new president, after a while, wanted Europeans gone. So they moved to France. Uncle Ange, grandma's brother, had left quite early, obviously seen the writing on the wall, so to speak, and he was the first to go, to my knowledge. And I don't know if you remember staying with Uncle Ange, do you? Did you ever stay? They just had a little 2-bedroomed flat in Marseille. So obviously Ange and Valeria had 1 bedroom, and in the other bedroom, in bunk beds, was your granddad's mum and dad's grandma and Valeria's daughter, Anne-Marie, and dad in the top bunks.
So they all lived in a 2-bedroom flat?
They all lived in a 2-bedroom flat.
So you talked about like 6 or 7 people there?
There were 6 people there.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But they'd all had to leave with no money. They had to leave all their things behind. Basically, they were sort of refugees. I don't know where Auntie Jeanne was to begin with, whether she was there too with Kyriakos, but I think Tas came straight to
London.
UK because he somehow had a UK passport, and I think that's because some were in his line. He was Greek Cypriot and Cyprus was British.
Yep.
Which was good for them. And then after a while, Nina came to London and Dad followed.
Yep.
But because Dad had done some high school, but you'd had to pay for tertiary education and Nina couldn't afford it. So he'd just done a little course in radio. So consequently, when he came here, to the UK, he got a job with a company called Imhoffs, which dealt in radios and televisions. And obviously, valves things were changing to transistors, and so he needed more qualifications. And then when he tried to do that, people wanted more basic things. So at night school he was doing O-levels and then HNC, and then he did the Open University. So I think he was still doing the Open University course
When I was born.
when you were born.
Yeah.
So that was quite hard because he was out most evenings studying.
Yeah. And so by this point, when I knew Daddy was at Ealing.
He went to Ealing just about the time you were born, because Ealing Hospital was brand new then. So he'd gone to start up the department.
Okay.
And so he was there for most of the rest of his working life. But he did have a spell of working at Central Middlesex Hospital. But that was a difficult journey. And then he went back to Ealing because they'd offered him more money.
Yeah.
So then he retired from Ealing.
Yeah. And you were at West Brompton at one point?
So I think it was about 88, 89. Mike Dunn, who you know, had been offered a job at with Magda Yakub, who worked both at the Brompton and at Harefield. So I went with Mike to the Brompton, and a few of the other people also went. He took a team with him. And then after a few years, the building at Harefield was built for the Science Centre, and we all moved out to Harefield.
And we were still living at Norfolk at that point?
Yes.
Yeah.
But not long after we moved to Ickenham.
And we moved to Ickenham to get closer to work for you, or
No,
it was just a good opportunity?
Because then life was changing in Norfolk. Yeah.
Getting busier.
Getting busier, definitely getting busier. Yeah, and Dad the house in Norfolk was smaller than the one we've got in Ickenham. But it wasn't so big that we thought we couldn't live in it when there was just the two of us.
Yeah. And Norfolk, I remember that long garden with the conifers, and at the other end there was a shed, and then used to dig holes and greenhouse.
You dug holes for
fun.
All over the place.
Yeah.
I think this garden is as long, but it's just arranged so differently, isn't it?
It's wider, isn't it?
It is wider because we now have a garage. We never had a garage.
Yeah.
And the houses were closer together in Norfolk.
Yeah. So I think we moved 95?
Yes, yeah. I think Claire was 21.
Yeah.
But we'd actually bought the place before then, and Dad was doing it up bit by bit, and we had that room put in the loft for you before we moved in.
Yeah.
And sort of a year afterwards, we got the extension.
Yeah.
The kitchen and the living room extension. I can remember the digging the foundations for that, and we thought, oh, that's good. Claire was at university. You had gone on a school holiday or some sort of school outing. It was half term, and it snowed. It was February half term, and it snowed.
Typical. Yep. All right, I'm just going to circle back a bit. So, holidays. So, obviously, Dad being foreign or international, I remember lots of holidays. Do you want to talk about the holidays we used to have? Like, I guess first off in the UK, and then maybe when we went
to going back even further, I didn't have holidays outside the UK until I got married, really. Although I'd been abroad with school, with the German class. And also, flights were getting cheaper then. So I think probably one of the first foreign holidays I remember with Dad what I call holiday as opposed to visiting relatives was to Benidorm.
Yep.
And that was flying from Luton then with a propeller plane, which I used to dread. And we often actually used to go at Christmas. Then we didn't get into difficulty who to visit at Christmas, whether it was his auntie or my mum and dad.
Yeah. So Benidorm, and then I remember going to like the south of France.
Yeah.
And
But then we used to have more caravan holidays, didn't we?
Yeah.
Yeah, we did. We did France quite a bit because obviously then Dad could go and
visit his friends.
Visit his family, and sometimes we combined it with the cousins' weddings, and auntie and uncle used to have a flat in Greece, so we'd been.
Glafada?
Sorry?
Glafada?
No, it wasn't Glifada.
Where's that come from?
Well, it might have been Glifada.
Because I remember we went to Athens, Hotel London.
Yes. No, well, Dad and I have been a couple of times. Maybe it was Glifada, which I think is just a little outside Athens, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, because Auntie, once the family had left, they used to go and spend the whole of the summer there, really. And then actually before I had Claire, we did a big holiday. We went to Russia. So that was the big holiday. So that was St. Petersburg, Moscow, and then Tbilisi, Sochi, I remember, Kiev, which is now Kyiv. There was somewhere else in between as well. And that was a good holiday. I hadn't realised that Central Europe was so hot in the summer. I mean, we were just used to moderate temperatures with the sea all around us.
Yeah.
But Central Europe is really hot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I went to uni, and then after I went to finish uni, I went travelling.
Yeah.
And around the same time, Claire had her first, Katie. And I recall that they used to go to America. Tim and Claire used to go to America a lot, and then they got married in the States. But you'd never left Europe before that point, had you?
No, I hadn't left Europe before then.
So I don't know what came first, if it was visiting me on my adventures, or...
I can't remember.
But that trip, that first trip, you didn't you fly to Asia, then Australia, then New Zealand, and then...
I think that was once I retired.
Was it?
I think
2006? Yeah, 7.
Something like that. Claire got married in
It was around
about
then.
the same time.
It was around 2000 and...
Katie's born 2004.
I think it's 2008. So Katie was born before she was married.
2004, yeah. So in fact, that the year they got married, Dad and I had done a trip round Europe, Eastern Europe. And I think just before we went, Claire said, would you mind if we got married in America? And gave us 2 weeks' notice after, well, it was obviously more than 2 weeks' notice because we were away for 2 weeks. So we just had a month's notice to get to America. But
right.
Tim had done the flights and the hotel. Well, it wasn't a hotel, it was a house. It was a resort. So we had our own house. So we had a big holiday round Poland and places like that, or East Germany and things. And then 2 weeks later, we were off to Orlando.
Oh, it was a good time.
That was a good time.
Yep.
That was a busy old thing. No, she got married. She got married when Robert was born.
Yeah, just after
Robert was
born.
3 months
Yeah.
or whatever. So that, oh yeah,
Busy time.
2000, yeah, I'm sure that was 2007. I think Robert's 2007. And she got married 2 days after Dad and I got married.
Yeah.
And so the only people there were Tim's mum and Dad and I. And they never told his brother or sister. And I don't know whether she told you.
No, I knew.
Yeah, but I think that was because you were a long way away.
It was in Australia, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So it was a small wedding.
Yeah, very small. And then, so after I was away for 3 years travelling, and I came back with Katie.
Yeah.
We lived in London. We were there, well, just short of 4 years.
Yeah.
And then I think shortly after I emigrated back to Australia, Dad started getting symptoms of his speech.
It was a couple of years after, really, because Grandma died January 2012, wasn't it?
Yep.
And we'd gone on holiday we'd done a river cruise down the Rhone, and that was in the autumn time. And a few weeks after that, he just came into so he was on his computer in the front room. He came into the living room and said something which didn't, and the words were sort of wrong. And then we both laughed, and he said it perfectly all right. But then it happened again, maybe 2 or 3 weeks later. And thinking, oh dear. So I got him to the doctor's before the Christmas, and Dr. Latif said he hadn't had a stroke, and to come back after Christmas and see if it was just certain syllables or whether it was only when he was tired. And unfortunately, Dad wouldn't go back to the doctor again. So,
stubborn man.
but would it have made any difference?
Probably not. So what was Dad's condition?
Eventually, the final diagnosis was progressive supranuclear palsy.
Yeah.
Which is on his death certificate, along with bronchopneumonia, chest infections usually take you.
Yeah, yeah.
No.
And so obviously he deteriorated slowly, right? It was over, 6-7 years?
Yeah, he was well enough to come out to your wedding in 2016.
Yep.
But he had some speech, but not a lot of speech then.
Yep.
And he was on a walking stick then,
walking stick and shuffling.
But by, I think, that Christmas he virtually had no speech, wasn't it?
6 months later.
About right, wasn't it?
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah. Difficult.
Yeah. And those years you cared for him at home?
Yeah. It was just one day when I couldn't get him out of bed. When I phoned the GP, he just said ring for the ambulance. And then he was taken to Hillingdon. That was the first time he'd been in hospital. And they had said, prior to that, we noticed when he ate, he often
One side
got
of his mouth.
food caught, and he used to cough And they'd said to me, how heavy is he? And I said, 66 kilo. And they said, no, he's not, he's only 49. So he'd lost so much weight and I hadn't particularly noticed. And they really wouldn't let me out of hospital unless I got a carer in. So that's when you have a social services carer for 7 days, and then you have to get your own carer. You can keep the social carer one if you don't have the means to pay for your own carer.
Yeah. And this was all pre-pandemic.
Yes, it was end of 2018. But moving about was getting more and more difficult. And we got a wheelchair in, don't know, I suppose mid-2019. I can't remember exactly. Because he hadn't been able to walk for us, what do you want to do when you get the chair? And he wanted to go down to the Titch and have fish and chips. So, and it didn't come till 4 o'clock that Friday afternoon.
Yeah.
So we did get down there. And luckily, at about that time, I'd seen a notice in the church news that they were starting a memory cafe. And I thought, I've got to get there, because I couldn't go out and leave him. So that's where we used to go once a week. And where I met Leslie, who used to run it, and it was only about a year, and then it used to be weekly. And he looked forward to that as well, because
Going out of the house.
Going out the house, and there were other people and just doing different things.
Yeah, absolutely.
But he was able to have a drink when we first started to go, although I put something in it, put some thickener in it so he didn't choke. So, I can't remember. Was it March 20 that the
Pandemic started, yeah?
Yeah.
Wow.
And about that time, I think maybe just before then, they had fitted a peg. So I fed him through by mouth and peg. And mouth feeding was really for flavour and texture.
Yeah.
And then, of course, everything shut down, didn't it? But then once things started opening up again, he was then too ill to go back.
Yeah.
To do these things. We also went to another club in Ruislip, run by Age UK. We used to, well, obviously when we first started, he could eat and play games, and he used to like playing dominoes.
Oh, yeah.
But then, obviously, that all stopped.
Yep. There you go. So I guess the final few questions are like, how do you want Dad to be remembered? How do you want yourself to be remembered?
Oh God.
Have you got any words of wisdom?
You remember Dad as a gentle family man. He'd always help you and do things and mend things for you and
Absolutely.
spend time in the garden. He liked his gardening,
Love gardening.
didn't
Yeah.
he? Yeah, he'd never ever had his own garden before, and he never had anyone to show him how to do anything, but he obviously had the knack of mending things and used to go out and pre-computer time go to the library and get a book or buy a book.
Yeah.
And find out how to mend the plumbing or
Yeah.
do
It
whatever.
was handy.
A handyman, definitely. Do
Yeah.
I miss him as a handyman?
Oh, I do. I wish he'd talk. I wish I'd listened to him.
Well, this is it.
Don't listen when you're younger, do you?
No, you don't.
So
You don't appreciate what you've got till you haven't got it.
that's it. Yeah. And what about yourself? How would you want to be remembered?
I've never thought of how do I want to be remembered. Don't know.
Sociable, happy.
I hope so. Yeah, contented. Yeah.
Yeah. Easygoing.
I don't think. Yeah, I think I'm relatively easygoing.
You are.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah. I suppose yeah. I suppose sort of family orientated as well.
Yeah.
I would try to keep in touch with people, which I've discovered more how important it is because Leslie ran Memory Club, which she still runs it. She kept in touch with me the whole, well, obviously during COVID she used to ring round, see how people were. But even once Dad died, she used to ring me once a fortnight,
Yeah.
see how I was.
Makes a difference.
And
right?
now we're friends. We go out for dinner and go
Yeah.
for coffee, and yes, I'm invited back to Memory Club, and I sort of sit there and help the other people who are.
Yeah.
A Memory Club has sort of changed because it's no longer just for people who are having memory problems, but also people who are on their own.
Yeah. Yeah. Fair enough. And obviously, this is not the end. Like it's the end of this holiday, but you're off to Morocco, and have you got other plans for the
Not-
next few years?
No, not really. Not holiday-wise. I'd like to get the house back to how I feel it ought to be in the garden, how I feel it ought. Although Dad said to me, don't worry about the garden, don't worry. But no, I don't like it the way it is.
The garden's huge, though. That's the only problem.
It is big, but if I can get it, it needs maintenance rather than being so much better.
Yeah.
But at the moment it needs a bit of work on it.
Cool.
And also, you might think that, although we did say when we moved into Ickenham, we ought to decorate one room each year so you don't get this big redo, but in fact, we didn't do. And so now, yes, rooms need doing.
Mm.
Quite happy with my kitchen.
But the house was done, like, from when we moved in, it was in a good state.
It was in a good state, but things change. I mean,
Yeah.
You
This
know.
is 30 years ago, right? It's 30.
yeah. Okay, we have redecorated and recarpeted and things in the main room, and I've now done my bedroom. I think some of the other rooms, I was just thinking, eventually I probably need to clear out Claire's room and get that done. Because she wanted, and she was allowed to decorate her room herself, she wanted this paint with bits in it on her ceiling, and it's got to come off.
Right.
And I think I need a new. No, I like my bathroom actually, but what I've never liked are the tiles in there.
Yeah.
But it weren't my choice because I couldn't make up my mind what I wanted. So, but I still can't make up my mind what I
Oh, that's
want.
all right.
And the thing, the Dad's wheelchair cracked the cover for the bath.
Yeah.
But otherwise, I like the shape of the basin. I like the shape of the bath. It's really the tiles and the electric needs doing because the light went. And Jude came in and gave me a light, but it doesn't have a shade and things on it, and it's there's bits and pieces. Same in the kitchen.
Oh, you're going to be busy then.
if it's not me, it's telling other people to be busy for
Well,
me.
that's being busy, right?
And I
Project
hope,
management.
I hope you've checked that this is working.
I hope it's recording. So, all right. Well, thank you.
Is that all right?
Yeah.
Good.
Fingers crossed. Yeah. Anyway, we hope you had a good holiday.
I have.
Cool.